In this lecture, we'll learn some basic ideas that you might find useful when trading stocks. First, though, we need to cover a little of the mechanics of stock trading. A lot happens at the supermarket that we don't usually see. All we see is the food on the shelves. But the food doesn't appear by magic, you know. Somebody delivered it and put it on those shelves. Somebody kept track of who owned it every step of its way through the delivery. If it was a special order, maybe a cake from the bakery, then somebody took the order and saw to it that the cake was baked at the proper time. Most of the time, we don't care about any of that. We just want the item we want to be there when we want it. We want the best price possible, we want to check out as quickly as possible, and we don't want any mistakes. Just like in a supermarket, a lot happens behind the scenes in a stock market. Somebody is responsible for making sure the shares we want are available. Somebody will handle special orders. Somebody knows who owns the stock now, and somebody will record the transfer of ownership. Most of the time, just like at a supermarket, we don't care about any of that. We just want the item we want to be there when we want it. We want the best price possible. We want to check out as quickly as possible, and we don't want any mistakes. The TV commercials make it seem as if investors are directly connected with the securities markets. They click their mouse or press a button, and the trade goes through instantly. That's not quite true. The actual completion of a trade, called its execution, isn't immediate. When you click on your computer, your order is sent electronically to your brokerage firm. It's just the electronic equivalent of a phone call giving instructions. At this point, you haven't bought or sold anything. You don't even know the price. Before the trade can happen, your brokerage firm has to find someone willing to take the other side of the trade. After you place your order, it goes to one of 4 places for execution. The firm has to give you the best execution for your order that's reasonably available. The first of these 4 methods is the old standby, sending the order to the stock exchange. Your order gets matched to someone who wants to buy it if you're selling, or to sell it if you're buying. The second route is through one of more than 500 market makers. Market makers are companies that stand ready to buy or sell at least 100 shares at its posted quotes. Their buy price is a little lower than their sell price, so the company can make a profit. The difference in the buy and sell prices is called the spread. Routing trades to a market maker is more common for NASDAQ or other so-called over-the-counter stocks, which tend to be the stocks of smaller companies. Third, your order might go to an electronic communications network, or an ECN. An ECN automatically matches buyers and sellers who agree on price. This is fast because computers do the work. Fourth, your broker may internalize your order. This means your broker's firm has the shares you need in its own inventory already. In this way, your broker's firm may make money on the spread, the difference between the quoted buy price and the quoted sell price. After your order works its way through one of these 4 routes and finds a counterparty, the order is executed. The actual exchange of money and securities occurs later. The entire process of routing your order through the markets to find a counterparty is usually blindingly fast. It often takes less than a second. Prices can change quickly, though. What's more, the price quote you saw on your screen or got from your broker is for a specific number of shares. Either the timing lag or the size of the quote can cause you to get a different price than you expected when you placed your trade. The second portion of your transaction, called clearing, occurs after the trade is executed. Wall Street uses the word clearing to refer to record keeping and transaction services between the time you make your trade until settlement, which is when the money and securities officially change hands. Clearing involves stuff like reporting the trade to appropriate entities and confirming that the trade meets any legal or SEC requirements. Of course, all brokers keep their own records for all of their clients' trades, but brokers don't do the actual act of clearing. Clearing used to be much less efficient. In the early 1970s, the backlog of records of trades got so bad that the stock exchanges closed on Wednesdays to give harried back offices time to catch up. Messengers had to hustle around Wall Street with bags of paper stock certificates and checks. Can you imagine how tough it was to keep up as volume increased? The risk of losing stuff to theft, fraud, or simple error was huge too. Things got much better after the Depository Trust Company got into the act in 1973. The DTC, which later became a subsidiary of the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, combines two brilliant ideas for handling this massive record-keeping task. The first idea is immobilization. Can you think of a good reason why paper stock certificates representing ownership have to move physically from one place to another? I can't. They aren't like a present that needs to be shipped to a toddler on her birthday so that she can play with it. Stock certificates are just proof of ownership. As long as we agree on a reputable organization to store the certificates for us, all we need to do is change the record of ownership. The certificate itself doesn't have to move at all. That's called book entry. No certificates physically move. They're immobilized. By 2001, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation handled over $120 trillion worth of cash and securities. That's a lot of stuff that we didn't have to move around, isn't it? The second brilliant idea to resolve the paperwork backlog was multilateral netting. If you sell $1,000 worth of shares in Wendy's to me and you buy $1,000 worth of Starbucks from Diane, then instead of me sending $1,000 to you and you sending $1,000 to Diane, wouldn't it be easier for me just to send $1,000 to Diane and we all call it even? Granted, if we only have 3 players and 2 trades, then we don't save much. But we have thousands of brokers making thousands of trades. Netting allows each brokerage firm to send or receive just one single dollar amount to or from the central counterparty. Most of the time, this reduces the dollar amounts that actually move by well over 90% and as much as 98%. That's a huge reduction in the chance for error, and it saves money too. We've been talking about placing an order to buy or sell shares as if there's only one type of order. The world isn't that simple because people have different needs. You've seen this in other markets. Say you're buying a car. A car dealer might post a standing offer to sell all cars of one particular make and model for $25,000. If anyone offers to buy at this price, then he'll sell. He's posted what's called a limit sell order. If instead you say, I'll take whatever price the market is bearing, then you've placed a market order. But if you think that $25,000 is too much, then you can give the dealer your phone number on your way out the door and tell him you'll buy if it comes down to $24,000. That's a limit buy order. These different types of orders serve different functions. Market participants have developed several different types of buy and sell orders. They give the broker instructions about the timing of an order, acceptable prices, or the duration of the order, how long it lives. Most of their names describe what they mean, so we don't need to memorize much. Each type of order fits a different investing need. The simplest type of order is the market order. That tells your broker to buy or sell at the best available price right now. Usually execution is within minutes, if not seconds. You can't be sure of the price though, not even if you have your broker on the phone or you're sitting at your computer and you can see the current prices. You might not get your price because the quotes change between the time you place your order and the time it's executed, or maybe because the size of your order doesn't quite match the size of the quote. Size mismatches become more likely as the order size increases. For example, a quote might be for 100 shares at $20 per share. If you want to buy 200 shares, then you might get 100 of them for $20, but you have to pay a few cents more per share for the second 100 shares. The next two types of bid are limit orders and stop orders. Let's start with a limit buy order. When might you use a limit buy order? Maybe you're about to go on vacation, but have had your eye on shares of Boeing. I don't want to pay today's price, you say, but if the price drops to $100 while I'm away, then I'd like to buy 100 shares. A limit buy order for a price of 100 fills the bill. If Boeing shares drop to 100, then your limit order becomes a market order ready for execution. You either get the shares at your price or you don't get them at all, and you aren't bothered during your vacation either. If we flip the story so that you want to sell your shares if the price rises to your specified target price, then you want to use a limit sell order. You'd use a limit sell if you picked a profit on your shares that's big enough to get you to cash out. Suppose that you bought Boeing at $28 in the spring of 2003. That would have been great because it tripled by January 2007. Would you want to sell, or would you think it would go even higher? Again, you might want to decide in advance rather than risk an emotional decision. If so, then you can place a limit sell order to execute if Boeing reaches your target price. Let's change our vacation scenario a bit. You're still going on vacation and don't want to be bothered, but this time you already own Boeing shares, and instead of being optimistic about Boeing, you think the current price might be too high. You don't want to sell now, but if it falls below, say, $100, then you don't want to deal with the chance it'll fall even further. If it falls to $100, then you want out. This is the time to place a stop loss order. If the stock price falls below your target, then your order to sell is executed. The idea is to limit your loss on a security holding. Some investors use limit orders as a way of deciding the biggest loss they can handle in advance. They don't want to risk making an emotional decision that they'll regret later, so they place limit orders beforehand. Now let's flip the scenario. Instead of your sell order being triggered by the stock price falling below your limit, you want to buy if the price rises to your specified limit. This is called a stop buy order, or sometimes a buy stop order. When might you want to use one of these? Why would you wait to buy until the stock price rises? On February 2009, Boeing traded at about $35, down from over $100 in just 16 months. You might think, man, I can't believe that slide. The long-run prospects for that company are just too good for that decline to last. I'm sure that it's headed back to $100. But you're not sure whether the stock will decline further before it turns around, and you don't want to buy now if that's going to happen. At the same time, you want to be sure to own that stock if it heads back to 40 because you're convinced that that would mean investors realize that Boeing has been undervalued and it's on its way back to $100. You're worried that you might let your emotions get the better of you. You're afraid that you might think, I'll wait until it falls from $35 to $25 and then I'll buy. Well, friend, it may never fall back to $25 and you may never buy. You can take some of the emotion out of your decision with a stop buy order telling your broker to buy if the price rises to $40. Limit orders do have their drawbacks. First, limit orders typically cost more than market orders. Second, short-term stock price fluctuations can trigger a limit order, and you can't predict these movements. The stock price might just barely move past the limit so that your order executes, and then the price can reverse back past the limit again. Third, you can't be sure that you'll get exactly your limit price. A limit order isn't necessarily executed at the limit price. No, a limit order becomes a market order at the limit price. We've already seen that the execution price for a market order can differ from the quoted price at the time it's actually placed. Limit orders are a class of orders that specifies a price. Another class specifies how long the order lives before it's canceled. One example is a day order. Want to guess how long a day order lasts? Yep, A day order lasts for the rest of the day. It automatically expires if it isn't executed on the day it was placed. Day orders are often the default duration for orders. Other types of conditional orders have different durations, and fortunately, most of their names describe themselves, so we can easily tell what they're designed to do. For example, how long do you think a good till canceled order lives? You're right, it lasts until it's canceled. If I place a limit order that isn't filled today, then it's still alive tomorrow. Good till canceled orders, or GTC orders for short, don't really live forever. Most of the time, brokerage firms cancel an unfilled GTC order after 2 or 3 months. One brokerage firm lets GTC orders expire on the last business day of the month following the month in which it was placed. IOC orders stand for immediate or cancel. As you've surely guessed, these orders are either executed immediately or they're canceled. Big players need to remember that an IOC might be partially filled. The market might not be able to handle an order for 10,000 shares immediately. In that case, you might get 3,000 shares immediately and the rest of your order is canceled. The all or none order is a relative of the immediate or cancel order. Unlike an IOC, though, AON orders specify that no partial execution is allowed. It's just like the name says, all or none. You can also specify that your order should be executed the next time the market opens or closes. These are called, of course, at the open and at the close orders. You can make these market or limit orders too. If the transaction can't occur at the limit price, then the order is just canceled. Be aware that lots can happen while a stock market is closed. No matter where you live and trade securities, it's always daylight somewhere in the world. Time doesn't stand still while markets are closed. Buy and sell orders accumulate overnight, and information that affects stock prices hits the wire while you're asleep. This means that the opening price tends to be highly volatile. That's not to say that it's unfair. It's just that it's more likely to be wrong at open by more than it is during the rest of the day. Whether it's too high or too low is still anybody's guess. You'll sometimes hear the expression round lot. That just means an order for some multiple of 100 shares, like 100 or 500. An odd lot is an order for any number of shares less than 100. Odd lots and mixed lots, which are combinations of round lots and odd lots, such as 114 shares, cost the same per share as round lots unless your brokerage firm has a fixed price per trade. In that case, the size of the trade matters. A flat fee of $5 per trade is a nickel per share for 100 shares, but it's a quarter per share for just 20 shares. Let's turn to margin accounts. What are margin accounts anyway? A margin account is a convenient way to borrow money in order to buy more stock. That's called buying on margin. Because it enables you to own more shares, buying on margin magnifies your gains. Making $1 per share on 200 shares is twice as good as making $1 per share on 100 shares. Of course, you can lose too. I don't need to tell you that losing $1 per share on 200 shares is twice as bad as losing $1 per share on 100 shares, do I? The investing world uses 2 types of margin. The first is initial margin. That's the percentage of the stock price that comes from your own funds. The Federal Reserve sets minimum margin requirements. Usually it's about 50% initially. That means you can buy $1,000 worth of stock with $500 of your own money and $500 worth of cash borrowed from your margin account. The second type of account is maintenance margin. As the name suggests, this is the minimum amount of equity you can have in your margin account without being required to deposit more funds. Maintenance margin limits vary from broker to broker. The New York Stock Exchange and the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority require a minimum of 25% equity relative to the total market value of the securities in the margin account. But brokerage firms commonly require 30 to 40%. Another way to trade with the help of borrowing is called short selling. What's a short sale? You don't borrow money for a short sale. You borrow a share and sell it. Eventually, you're going to have to return the borrowed share, of course, so why would you want to do this? To answer the question of why you do it, we need to know when you win by doing it. You win if you can repurchase and return the share at a lower price than you got when you sold it. When you sell short, you're betting that the share price will fall. Short selling, or just shorting, is extremely popular. Professors Carl Diether, Quan-Hui Lee, and Ingrid Werner showed that short selling during 2005 comprised 24% of trading volume on the New York Stock Exchange. It was an even bigger part of trading volume on the NASDAQ, 31%. Most short sellers are major players like large institutions and wealthy, experienced investors. The rules for shorting are fairly detailed. The SEC says that short sellers can borrow from one of their brokerage firm's customers or from some other brokerage institution. Most of the time, you have to short round lots instead of odd lots. After the sale, the short seller doesn't get access to the proceeds until she closes the position. She has to leave them with the brokerage firm that handled the sale as collateral to help guarantee that she'll be able to buy the replacement shares. Because you don't own the stock you're short selling, remember, you borrowed it, you have to make good on any payments the stock made during the course of the short. For example, you have to turn over any dividends to the security lender. If the stock splits 2 for 1 while you hold the short position, then you'll have to return twice the number of shares. You're also subject to margin calls. That's a notification to put more cash in your account. Suppose you short at 50. You have to leave that $50 with your broker as collateral so that you'll be able to replace the shares that you borrowed when necessary. But suppose that the shares rise to $100. Now you don't have enough money in your account to secure your promise to repurchase those borrowed shares. You're going to get a margin call. If you don't pony up enough to satisfy the brokerage firm, then you're going to have your short position closed whether you like it or not. And you're going to have to come up with any shortfall the firm incurred in closing the position. Short sellers hate margin calls. What happens if the lender of the shares wants his stock back before you're ready to close the short position? He owns them, so he gets them, or at least he gets identical shares back. Your broker might be able to borrow shares from somewhere else to satisfy the original lender, but if not, then you're going to have to cover your position. The term for this is having your shares called away. This doesn't happen often, but it's more likely when short interest is high. The short interest is just the number of shares of a company that have been shorted. Some people see short interest as an indication of whether investors think the share price is likely to fall. You can get short interest levels for stocks from financial publications such as Barron's, the Investor's Business Daily, and of course, the Internet. Some people don't approve of short sellers and say that we should ban shorting. Most of them accuse short sellers of one of two things. The first is called short and distort. Traders short a stock, then spread rumors to hurt the firm and drive down the share price. If this works, and I emphasize if, then they might be able to repurchase the shares for less than they got for the short. They make a profit that has nothing to do with skillful stock selection. It's stock manipulation. The second thing we hear is that short sellers aren't doing anything bad, but they're just wrong. The stock is worth more than the short sellers think, and through their error, they drive down the stock price to levels that are too low. If either of these things happens, then we do have a problem because stocks that are underpriced relative to their fundamental values are bad for the economy. Companies with underpriced shares have trouble raising capital. They'll have trouble expanding. And that's not all. Some other company will get the resources instead. Investments in the wrong firms or industries are expensive or impossible to unwind. Once you build that infamous bridge to nowhere, you're not going to melt down its steel girders to use somewhere else, and you'll never recover the skilled labor that built it. Some other company could have used that steel and labor more productively, and that's a loss for the economy. Personally, I don't think that short sellers are a problem. I don't approve of short and distort, but it's just the flip side of what happens with long positions. That's pump and dump. In pump and dump, the bad guys take a long position, betting that share prices will rise, and then they start favorable rumors to try to get the target stock's price to increase. If you think that short and distort is wrong, then you have to agree that pump and dump is just as bad, and that has nothing to do with short sales. The problem is intentionally spreading false information, not short sales. I'm certainly not going to defend people who do this. I just don't want you to think that short selling is to blame. As for the second alleged problem, the people claiming that short sellers are wrong and driving down the share price are often high-level managers of a company that's experienced a big stock price decline. At the same time these managers are saying that the stock market doesn't recognize what a great company they have, some analysts are saying that those managers have done a bad job. If they really have done a bad job, then the short sellers are just betting that the bad managers will eventually ruin the company and the stock price will fall as a result. I can't blame them for acting on that belief. You can probably tell that I don't think that banning short sales is a good idea. I'll give you 4 reasons why. First, short sellers add liquidity to markets. Given that a quarter or a third of all sales are shorts, a ban would cut trading volume a lot. For most stocks, there would still be plenty of liquidity in most cases, but for more thinly traded shares, buyers might have more trouble finding a seller. Second, the evidence suggests that short sales tend to drive prices to the right values sooner rather than later. There's evidence that prices get too high without short sales. We've seen that that would cause problems for the economy. Third, short sellers have been among the first to identify financial fraud. James Chanos, a well-known short seller, identified what seemed to him to be fraudulent accounting practices that occurred with an energy trading and utility company. That was in 2001, and the company was the Enron Corporation. Time proved him to be correct. Cases like this suggest that, far from being a problem, short sellers can do a lot of good. Finally, bans just don't seem to help. Professors Robert Battaglio and Paul Schultz of the University of Notre Dame, along with Hamid Miran, an assistant vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's Research and Statistics Group, studied short selling with a focus around the financial crash of 2008. U.S. regulators banned short sales of financial stocks in 2008. They were worried that shorting was contributing to the big declines in those stocks at the time. The trio of researchers found that prices fell noticeably during the 2 weeks while the ban was in force and then steadied after it was removed. The short sale bans increased trading costs too. The authors estimated that the ban cost traders in U.S. markets about $500 million from September 18th through October 8th, 2008 by reducing liquidity. To check their conclusions, Battaglio, Moran, and Schultz studied what happened after the downgrade of the United States credit rating in 2011. They found that stocks that you couldn't short actually did worse than stocks that you could short. Opposing a ban on shorting is a far cry from suggesting that people like us should conduct short sales. We're investors, not traders. We're looking to make money over a reasonably long period of time, certainly longer than people hold short positions. Short sales are very risky indeed, and we can get a better expected return without taking that risk. We don't want to fight battles when the odds are against us. I don't recommend that you short stocks unless you've been investing for a while or if you're just doing it for fun and don't care if you lose some money. After all, nobody cares if you spend some hard-earned cash on football tickets when at the end of the game all you have are some pleasant memories of a good time. If you think it'd be fun to short some shares, then fine, short away. Otherwise, until you get a lot of experience, don't try to make money by shorting stocks. In our next lesson, we'll examine some common trading strategies, identify some common trading mistakes, and explore the fascinating world of options.